We've all seen the picture, the one with the ape on the far left, slowly standing up straighter and getting less hairy, until you have a modern human on the far right. It's called the March of Progress. It's clean, it's simple, and it's completely wrong. The real story of human evolution is a messy, sprawling family tree. It has dead ends, weird cousins, and long lost ancestors we're only just beginning to understand. The biggest question for most of us isn't about the names and dates. It's simpler. What did they actually look like? If you met one on a path, what would you see? The honest answer is we don't know for sure. We can't. All we have are bones. Skeletons, skulls, teeth, sometimes a footprint hardened in ancient mud. Everything else, the stuff that makes a face, is gone. Skin, muscle, fat, cartilage, hair, eyes, it all rots away. So when you see a museum reconstruction of an early hominin, you're looking at a piece of art as much as a piece of science. It's an educated guess. A very, very educated guess, but a guess nonetheless. The artist and the scientist work together. The scientist provides the foundation, the bony blueprint. The artist then layers on the missing pieces using clues from the bones and knowledge of modern apes and humans. Okay, let's start with what we do know. The bones are the bedrock. A skull tells us the size and shape of the brain. A big, round brain case like ours means a big brain. A smaller, flatter one means a smaller brain. The place where the spine connects to the skull, the foramen magnum, is a dead giveaway. If it's at the back of the skull, like in a chimp, the creature walked on all fours. If it's directly underneath, the creature walked upright on two legs. This is one of the first and most important changes we see. The jaw and teeth tell us about diet. Huge, thick molars mean a diet of tough, fibrous plants that required a lot of grinding. Think of a cow-chewing cud. Smaller teeth, especially in the front, suggest a more varied diet, maybe including meat that was cut or processed with tools. The size of the jaw itself, whether it juts out in a snout or is flat like ours, reshapes the entire face. The pelvis is another huge clue. A chimp's pelvis is long and narrow. It's built for climbing and knuckle walking. A human pelvis is short, wide, and bowl-shaped. It's a basket to hold our organs and a stable platform for walking on two legs. We can see this transition clearly in the fossil record. Lucy, the famous Australopithecus, had a human-like pelvis. She walked upright. But her shoulders and fingers tell a different story. They were built for climbing. So she was a creature of two worlds, the trees and the ground. So the skeleton gives us the frame. It tells us their posture, their height, their brain size, and something about their lifestyle. But what about the rest? What about the flesh? This is where the detective work gets tricky. Muscles leave marks on bones where they attach. A big, rough patch on a bone means a big, powerful muscle was anchored there. Look at the top of a gorilla skull. Many males have a ridge of bone running down the middle, a sagittal crest. This isn't part of the brain case. It's an anchor point for massive jaw muscles. Some early hominins had this too, so we can reconstruct their jaw muscles and know they had a tremendously powerful bite. The same goes for leg and buttock muscles. The shape of the pelvis and femur tell us how big their glutes were, which are critical for upright walking and running. Fat is almost pure guesswork. We have it. Apes have less of it. We don't know when our ancestors started storing fat the way we do. It's an energy reserve, vital for a creature with a power-hungry brain, but how much they had and where they stored it is a mystery. Reconstructions often show them as lean and muscular, but that's just an assumption based on an active lifestyle. And now, the most obvious things. Skin and hair. This is a big one. For a long time, paleo artists just made it up. They'd give earlier hominins darker skin and more hair, and later ones lighter skin and less hair, following that old March of Progress idea. But now we have better science to guide the guesses. Skin color is an adaptation to sunlight. Near the equator, where the sun is strongest, dark skin with lots of melanin protects against harmful UV rays. It also prevents the breakdown of folate, a vitamin essential for development. As populations moved away from the equator into regions with less sun, lighter skin evolved. The lighter skin is better at producing vitamin D from weaker sunlight, which is crucial for bone health. So, an early hominin living in the East African savanna, like an Australopithecus or Homo erectus, almost certainly had dark skin. It would have been a huge evolutionary advantage. The question is, when did they lose their body hair? A chimp has dark skin under its black fur. It's thought that our ancestors lost their thick coat of body hair as they spent more time on the hot, open savanna. Losing hair allows for more efficient sweating. Sweating is the best way to cool down, and it would have allowed them to be active during the day, to travel long distances for food or water without overheating. Once the body hair was gone, the now exposed skin needed protection. That's likely when darkly pigmented skin became the norm. So, a creature like Homo erectus was probably dark-skinned and mostly hairless, except for the head. Their hair on the head would still be useful to protect the scalp and the brain from the direct heat of the sun. So you can imagine a creature that looked surprisingly human in its skin and hair profile, but with a very different face and head shape. What about the nose? The nose is mostly cartilage, which doesn't fossilize. All we have is the bony opening in the skull. A wide, broad opening, like we see in many early African fossils, is suited for warm, humid air. A narrower, more projecting nasal passage, like we see in Neanderthals from Ice Age Europe, is better for warming and humidifying cold, dry air before it hits the lungs. So we can guess the general shape of the nose based on the climate they lived in. But the exact shape of the tip, the nostrils, that's artistic license. Lips and ears are also complete unknowns. We model them on what we see in modern primates. Lips are usually depicted as thinner and less fleshy than ours, more like a chimp's. But we don't know. And the eyes, we can't know the color. But there's a more interesting question. Look at your own eyes in a mirror. You have a colored iris, a dark pupil, and a lot of white around it. This is the sclera. In most other primates, the sclera is dark or barely visible. Our white sclera makes it very easy to see where we are looking. It's a tool for social communication. We follow each other's gaze. Did early hominins have this, or did they have ape-like eyes? It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about how they might have interacted. Most reconstructions give them darker, more ape-like eyes, assuming the white sclera is a more recent human trait. So, with all that in mind, let's take a walk through the family album. Let's go back 6 or 7 million years. We meet something like Sahelanthropus chidensis. We only have a crushed skull. It's tiny, with a chimp-sized brain. It has a massive brow ridge, bigger than a gorilla's. The face is flatter than an ape's, which is intriguing, and the foramen magnum is positioned forward, suggesting it might have held its head upright and walked on 2 legs. What did it look like? Probably very much like an ape. It likely had a full coat of hair. Its face would have been a strange mix of ape-like and something new. It was a creature on the very cusp of the human lineage. Fast forward to about 4 million years ago, to the Australopithecines. This is Lucy's family. Now we have a lot more fossils. We know they were small. Lucy herself was maybe 3.5 feet tall. They were definitely bipedal on the ground. We have their fossilized footprints at Laetoli to prove it. They walked with a slightly different gait than us, maybe a bit of a sway, but they still had long, powerful arms and curved fingers and toes. They were still spending a lot of time in the trees, probably to sleep and escape from predators. Their faces were very ape-like. They had a snout, a jutting jaw with big molars. They had no chin, their foreheads were low and sloping, and they had a brow ridge over their eyes. Their brain was bigger than a chimp's, but still only about 1/3 the size of ours. Their bodies were a mosaic. From the waist down, they were looking more human. From the waist up, they still looked very ape-like. They probably had a funnel-shaped rib cage, like an ape, to hold a large gut for digesting tough plants. As for hair, they were living on the savanna. It's possible they were starting to lose their body hair, but we can't be sure. They were a successful group that lasted for millions of years, a perfect transitional form between a tree-dwelling ape and a ground-dwelling hominin. Around the same time, there was another branch of the family, the Paranthropus group. These were the nutcracker men. They looked a lot like Australopithecines, but their heads were specialized to the extreme. They had enormous dinner plate-sized faces with wide, flaring cheekbones. Their molars were gigantic, 4 times the size of ours. To power this chewing machine, they had colossal jaw muscles. These muscles were so big they needed that bony crest, the sagittal crest, on top of their skulls to anchor them. Imagine a creature built like Lucy, but with the head of a chewing machine. They were a successful side branch that specialized in eating very tough foods, and they eventually died out. Then, around 2.5 million years ago, things start to change. We see the first members of our own genus, Homo. The earliest is often called Homo habilis, the handyman, because they were associated with the first simple stone tools. How do they look different? Like their brains were getting bigger. You can see it in the skull. It's more rounded, less flat. Their faces were becoming a little less snout-like, a bit flatter. Their teeth were getting smaller. This suggests a change in diet, perhaps more meat or more food processing with tools, which meant less heavy-duty chewing was needed. But from the neck down, they were still a lot like an Australopithecus. They had long arms and were still small-bodied. They were a crucial step, the beginning of the trend that would lead to us bigger brains, smaller teeth, and a reliance on technology. The real game changer arrives around 2 million years ago. Homo erectus, this was a new kind of hominin. If you saw one from a distance, just as a silhouette, you might mistake it for a modern human. They were tall, some over 6 feet. Their body proportions were just like ours: long legs, short arms. They were fully committed to life on the ground. They were long distance walkers and runners. Their skeleton was built for it, but their head was still very different. Their brain was much bigger than anything before it, maybe two-thirds the size of ours. But the skull was long and low, not high and round like ours. They had a thick, bony brow ridge that ran in a straight bar across their eyes. Their face still projected forward, but less than an Australopithecus. They had no chin. Their jaws were powerful. This is a hominin that we are fairly certain had lost its body hair and had dark skin. They lived in Africa and spread across Asia and into Europe. They controlled fire. They made much more sophisticated tools. They were the first true world travelers in our family tree. They were incredibly successful, lasting for well over 1.5 million years, far longer than we Homo sapiens have been around. They were not brutish cavemen. They were smart, adaptable, and a major leap towards the modern human form. After erectus, the picture gets a bit murky for a while. We call this period the muddle in the middle. Fossils from Africa and Europe show a mix of features. One important species from this time is Homo heidelbergensis. They were likely the common ancestor of us and the Neanderthals. They were large and robust. They had big brains, often as large as ours today. Their faces were a mix of old and new. They still had a big brow ridge, but it was often arched over each eye, not a straight bar like an erectus. Their faces were wider and flatter. They were skilled hunters, using long wooden spears to take down big game. And that brings us to our most famous relatives, the Neanderthals. Thanks to an abundance of fossils and even ancient DNA, we know more about what Neanderthals looked like than any other extinct hominin. They were not the stooped, brutish ape men of old cartoons. They stood fully upright. They were, on average, a bit shorter than us, but much more powerfully built. Their bones were thicker, and their muscle attachments were huge. They were stocky, with broad chests and short limbs. This body shape, like a cube, is a classic adaptation for conserving heat in a cold climate. They were built for the Ice Age. Their heads were also distinctive. Their skull was long and low, not tall and round. If you looked at it from behind, you might see a bulge at the back called an occipital bun. They had a prominent, arching, double brow ridge. Their face was dominated by a huge nose. The nasal opening in their skull is enormous. This was likely an adaptation to warm and moisten the cold, dry air of their environment. Their midface was pulled forward, as if someone had grabbed them by the nose and pulled. And they had a receding chin. Our chins stick out. They're sloped back. What about their skin and hair? For a long time, artists drew them as pale skin because they lived in Europe. Now, DNA analysis from Neanderthal bones has given us a shocking confirmation. We know that at least some Neanderthals carried genes for pale skin and red hair. So, the image of a freckled, red-headed Neanderthal is scientifically plausible. Not all of them looked like this, of course. They had a wide range, and their appearance would have varied, just like modern humans. But it shatters the old image of a single, uniform caveman look. While the Neanderthals were evolving in Europe and Asia, our own lineage, Homo sapiens, was evolving in Africa. Our earliest ancestors didn't look quite like us. They had bigger brow ridges and more robust faces. But the defining features were there. The brain case was becoming high and rounded, like a basketball instead of a football. The face was getting flatter, tucking in underneath the brain instead of projecting out in front of it. And we developed a unique feature, a pointy chin. No one is quite sure why we have chins. Our skeletons became lighter, more gracile. We weren't as powerfully built as Neanderthals. Maybe we were built more for endurance and efficiency than for brute strength. As we spread out of Africa and around the world, we adapted to different climates, resulting in the wide range of superficial appearances we see in people today. But our basic skeletal blueprint, the high, round skull and the flat face with a chin, has remained. It's a humbling story. For most of our history, we shared the planet with other kinds of humans. Imagine a world where you could walk from Africa to Europe and meet different human species along the way. Sahelanthropus in the south, Homo erectus in the east, Neanderthals in the west. They weren't just less evolved versions of us, they were different ways of being human. They were successful in their own right for a very long time. So when we try to picture them, we have to let go of that straight line. We have to imagine a world of variety. We see creatures who were mosaics of ape and human traits, creatures who were specialized for chewing tough plants, creatures built like tanks for the cold, and creatures built like us for endurance and adaptability. The reconstruction is always a work in progress. A new bone, a new genetic analysis can change the picture overnight. But by piecing together the clues, from the shape of a pelvis to the DNA in a sliver of bone, we can start to see their faces. We can start to see our strange, diverse, and wonderful family.